Salwan Momika is dead because all the jihadis can do is strike fear in the hearts of the free. So what we must do instead of fearing their knives and their guns is to stand as Salwan did and show a free man never runs. It is This Week in Jihad. David, we have had a bad week right after we finished last week's show. Our friend Salwan was murdered in Sweden, and the Swedish authorities were just about to put him on trial for burning the Quran, and instead the jihadis got him first. So I know it's been quite a few days. I'm sure you've done a lot of shows about this, but can you give us some thoughts about it?
Well, it is just interesting that the police and the governments are always on the side with the jihadis.
Always.
They're always on the same side. They go about it differently. The police and the governments will say, we'll lock you up and do this and that for your Facebook posts and so on. But it's the same. It had the same goal as far as silencing critics of Islam. And so, yep, these are dangerous, creepy times to be in. The jihad will kill this guy. Police say, no, we'll lock him up. They agree that Islam must never be critical. And so they have the same goal, just different methodologies. One saying, no, we'll do it our way, and the other one saying, no, we'll do it our way.
And the even worse part,
someone's saying I'm lagging. Hey, one second, Robert. Someone's saying I'm lagging. I just want to check and see if that's on my end. I may need to shut down or something.
Yeah, I noticed that when you.
Oh, you can go ahead and talk. I'll look up.
Okay. Yeah, when David was here before, we had this, but we didn't have this, but it seems to be there now. Anyway, Jason Allen asks, have they not caught the guys? And this is an even worse aspect of this problem. They did actually catch the guys, and they almost immediately released them. And so you have to wonder, wait a minute, is murder not a crime in Sweden anymore? Or is the murder of a foe of jihad violence not a crime in Sweden anymore? And that may indeed be the case, because these men were actually caught and then released, which sends just the worst kind of message to the world that Sweden, and indeed probably all of Europe, is not going to stand up against the jihadis and is in fact going to aid and abet them to silence all criticism of Islam. So David, what do you think? You're still here. Shall we just plow on, or what's your plan?
I'm thinking just to be on the safe side, I'm just going to go ahead and shut everything down and start it back up real quick. And that way, if there's a problem, my internet says it's running fine, but I don't know. These things just happen. Usually shutting down and starting back up helps somehow. But
yeah,
I'm going to go ahead and shut down.
It's blurry. You're coming in and out in terms of the video and the audio, so it may work. And I'll try to maybe I'll tell some jokes or do some dances while you're gone. And,
all right. I'll be back in a second.
We'll be back. So, ladies and gentlemen, we actually do have quite a bit more jihad, unfortunately. But this week is really a week of stupid infidels. And the Salwan Momika story, the murder is one thing, but there's so many terrible aspects of it that go beyond that it's staggering. And one of them also is that Salwan Momika actually burned the Quran several times, and he did so on several occasions in conjunction with Salman Najem, another Iraqi refugee, and you can see Salwan Najem there and Salwan Momika in the background. And this was at one of the Quran burnings. And so Salwan Najem was supposed to go on trial at the same time that Momika was, and Momika was murdered. Salwan Najem, meanwhile, was convicted of incitement for burning the Quran. And so we're talking about the man's friend. His blood is still fresh on the ground, and he is not protected. He is not held up as a warrior for the freedom of speech. He is not celebrated. Instead, he is convicted of a crime. And it's just incredible to me that this kind of thing is happening in what is supposed to be a country that values the freedom of expression. Now, you might think, wait a minute, now they're burning books, and burning books, the Nazis did that, and that's distasteful. We don't want to imitate the Nazis. And so these people, they're out of bounds. Criticism of Islam is one thing, but burning books is another. And the fact is, yeah, a lot of people have objections to burning books in principle, but in the first place, they don't have to worry. There are billions of copies of the Quran. There are probably several copies of the Quran for every person on earth today. And it's not as if they're going to create some kind of a loss. But aside from that, there is also the fact that the point that both Momika and Salwan Najm were trying to make was that the Quran contains dangerous ideas that lead people to do evil and make them think that they are being righteous when they do evil. And so they're doing exactly the opposite of what the Nazis were trying to do. The Nazis were trying to suppress various ideas that they disliked. The burners of the Quran in Sweden, including Salwan Momika, they were trying to call attention to these ideas so that people would realize that the Quran teaches these things and take action accordingly. When right now, immigration policy, terrorism policy, everything that has to do with Muslims in the West is predicated on the assumption that it's a religion of peace that has nothing whatsoever to do with terrorism. Now, if that were the case, then you might wonder why we have 46,000 jihad attacks around the world since 9/11, and that's a fruitful line of inquiry that we could follow. But the fact is that to suppress the criticism of the book is only going to encourage those who use the book to justify violence and terrorism. And so the Swedish government is exactly on the wrong track. And it is on the wrong track in a way that unfortunately all the rest of the West is essentially as well, just not as quickly. If Sweden's going to put people on trial for burning the Quran, they have abandoned the freedom of expression, and they now have a protected group in Sweden that is beyond criticism. Now let's see if David will come in more clearly. David, you actually look as blurry as you did before, but I think we should just try to go with it, all right?
No, I just checked. I'm having internet problems. It's going up to normal and then shooting down. So it's fluctuating. I may not be of much use to you now, unless this is just temporary and clears up. I don't even know if you can hear me right now.
I can hear you fine, and so I think
Okay.
we should plow on, try to get as much as we can in, and if this doesn't work, we'll just go with it. But in any case, there's more. I was just talking about Salwan Najm and how he was convicted of incitement right after Salwan Momika was killed, and about the implications of the freedom of expression. And there's more, quite a bit more to say about this. I wanted to note, for example, that AFP, that is Agence France Presse, AFP, one of the leading news outlets in the world, they published a story about Salwan Momika that was called Salwan Momika, the Quran Burner Who Sparked International Tensions. And the first paragraph says, Iraqi refugee Salwan Momika, who was shot dead late Wednesday in Sweden, stoked international controversy with his Quran burnings. Now I saw that, David, and I thought, wait a minute. There is something wrong with this picture. Can you guess what it is?
Blaming the victim. It's like saying, A provocatively dressed woman who was basically begging to be raped was raped last night after she enticed people to take advantage of her.
There you go.
Same thing.
And so AFP, of course, is not alone in this. All the news outlets are talking about it this way, as if it's his fault. See? And so the implication is if we just shut up and don't criticize Islam, if we don't burn the Quran, if we don't say the Quran contains incitement to violence and terror and hatred, then everything will be okay.
Yeah,
Right?
or yeah, if we just act like good dhimmis, we wouldn't be having this problem and we would be well-treated dhimmis.
Exactly. Yeah. And so in the UK, we had, excuse me, we had Martin
See.
Frost. Martin Frost was arrested this week after the death of Salwan Momika because he burned a Quran in protest after Momika was killed. And you see, he was arrested there by two cops who looked like they could be Muslims themselves. And his address and name were immediately published.
Even his birthday.
His birth date, that's right. So there'd be no mistake in case you wanted to go kill Martin Frost. You would not have to worry about killing the wrong Martin Frost, because I'm sure there's more than one in Britain. But you would get the exact right one that you need. They told people where he lived, his birth date, and the borough where he lived, his full name, etc. And so it's very clear that the Greater Manchester Police, who arrested Martin Frost for burning a Quran, which is officially not a crime in Britain, they still officially have the freedom of expression. But in any case, Martin Frost was arrested. The Greater Manchester Police clearly want him dead. They wanted jihadis to come and attack and kill him.
And I would say that's indisputable. I mean, you just basically gave a roadmap of how to kill this guy. We know there are jihadis who want to do it. And they said, hey, here's exactly how you can look this guy up and find him. And so he's basically been sentenced to death by the UK government. And this is something we talk about frequently. When it's a jihadi who slaughters unbelievers in the name of Allah, it's always some big mystery as to who it is. They only put out initials. Don't put out the actual name. And they always say they're looking for a motive and can't find one. But they never give you the details on how to find the person. They won't even give you the person's name. And here you are 5 seconds after this guy burns a Quran, and it's, hey, here he is. Here's how you find him. Here's his full name, date of birth, all that stuff, and where to locate him. So yeah, they sentenced this guy to either death or to be fleeing for his life for the rest of his life, all for the crime of saying, you guys shouldn't be murdering people over making fun of your book or criticizing your book or opposing your book. And therefore, since I do not want you to get the wrong idea and think that you have now silenced all critics by killing a man, I'm going to stand in solidarity with him and burn a Quran. And the UK government, no. You have to submit to these kinds of things. You have to submit to the murderous cult that is spouting the orders at you. It's sick stuff, man. Sick stuff. But
Yep.
Hey, I had to point out, Robert, you can't say no one warned these people. When they banned you, how long ago was that? I know it was over a decade ago.
That was 12 years ago now.
12 years ago, the UK government banned you and Pamela Geller because you're critics of Islam and you criticize Muhammad and you criticize the Quran, and we cannot allow you into our country. And you had British people who were saying, whoa, this is messed up. You also had British people who were celebrating it and saying, yes, keep them out, keep these troublemakers out. And of course, in our minds, we're thinking, wait, if Britain has gotten this bad now, 12 years ago, what are things going to be like in the future? Because they're not going to get better. They're going to continue getting worse. You look at the trajectory. If the trajectory continues as it is, and here we are 12 years later. Now they lock their own people up and sentence their own people to death. actually sentencing them to death or to a life of hiding over burning the Quran, making fun of the Quran, these kinds of things. Can't say they weren't warned. And the people who celebrated this 12 years ago can't feel bad for them. You could feel bad for the other people who didn't want this. But yep, they bringing it on themselves. So we're witnessing the suicide of an entire culture.
Absolutely, we are, and it's really unmistakable. Yeah, it's actually policy for the news outlets in Europe not to publish the names of perpetrators. And so routinely, we've seen it so many times on this show. I am reading an excerpt from a story, and I have to say Abu Bakr H or Muhammad Al Q because they don't tell you what the guy's last name is. They want to conceal and protect him. And that law was actually put in place in order to fight Islamophobia, so-called, and to keep people from thinking that these perpetrators were Muslims. The only problem was the people who instituted the law didn't realize it's not the surname, but the forename that gives you the clue as to the person's belief system. Like if you have a guy named John or James or Paul or Peter, he's more likely to be a Christian. And if you have a guy named Muhammad or Abdullah, then you're talking about a Muslim. And so the last names being concealed doesn't really do the job, but that's why that was put in place. But Martin Frost, he didn't get it. And yes, he has been sentenced to death just as unmistakably as that guy in Russia. Remember the guy in Russia who burned the Quran? And Putin is so worried about Ukraine, and he's got jihadis from Chechnya fighting for the Russians against the Ukrainians, that he actually sent this poor fellow to Chechnya to be tried, which is essentially giving him a death sentence in itself, because they know that he's going to be brutalized. He's already been beaten up in prison by the son of the head of Chechnya, Kadyrov, and he's almost certain to be killed while he's in prison there. Meanwhile, back in the Sceptred Isle, in UK, we have the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner. And Angela Rayner has been very busy this past week, David. She is setting rules on Islam and the freedom of speech. She is planning to create a council on Islamophobia to stamp out Islamophobia once and for all by placing criminal penalties on it. Now, one of the things that's been a sticking point about this effort, which has been actually going on for years, is that people can't define what Islamophobia is. And this is actually a complaint that we have had, that we've made many times, that Islamophobia, if you're talking about vigilantes attacking some innocent Muslim for wearing a hijab, of course, yeah, that's terrible. Very bad. Nobody's in favor. But if you use the same word to refer to like what we're doing now and talking about violence that is justified according to the Quran and the Sunnah, then that's just an attempt to silence it. And that's exactly what this is. The British authorities, Angela Rayner, is planning to use this definition. Islamophobia is rooted in racism and is a type of racism that targets expressions of Muslimness or perceived Muslimness. What do you think?
Pretty idiotic. And it's always interesting to see Muslims celebrate definitions like this, where it's rooted in racism. It's like, on the one hand, they want to say Islam is for everybody. Everyone needs to submit. And then as soon as you criticize it based on things that it claims, they go, you're racist. You're racist. You just hate brown people. And
what about all the ginger jihadis in Britain?
Yeah, absolutely. Every redhead in the UK has converted to Islam by now. And so, so it's just pathetic. But yes, Muslimness, and it's just amazing. For everyone who's watching, the concerns, there's always this problem. It's called equivocation. It's called equivocation. When you have a word that has multiple meanings and definitions, and then you can sort of change the meaning as it suits whatever you're trying to do. And so in order to avoid that, people being able to just change the definition as they see fit, you usually want to say for something like this, when you're talking about like punishing people and marginalizing people or sentencing people to prison and so on, you normally want some pretty darn clear definitions of what you're talking about. And so, criticisms of Muslimness. What do you mean? If you say, hey, if you say, I want to kill apostates, and I say, don't kill apostates, well, killing apostates is endorsed by Muhammad. It's something to do with Muslimness. And so if I say, don't kill apostates, I'm criticizing you based on your Muslimness. And so is that what you mean? Is that what your leaders mean?
Yeah,
because
that is what they mean, because they want to shut up all criticism of Islam.
Yeah, it's somehow the people who refuse to mindlessly submit to the ramblings of an illiterate 7th century Arabian caravan robber / pedophile are the bad guys. And who are the good guys? The guys who can't submit fast enough and condemn anyone who refuses to submit to this nonsense. And it's just, I mean, think about what they're defending here. We're saying, hey, this guy was a pedophile. Look at all the main defenders of Islam right now. They're the world's leading champions of child marriage. They're all defending. Of course, we should be able to have sex with 7-year-olds and 8-year-olds and 9-year-olds. Of course, we should. And we say, no, don't do that. And then we get attacked by the governments, by police. How dare you oppose sex with prepubescent little girls? How dare you? How dare you? You're monsters. What sort of evil monsters are you? It's insane, man. I have to say, Robert, if I were an atheist, I would have to start thinking about some spiritual realm of demonic forces, because it's difficult to believe people can be this insanely stupid. People who are educated at like Oxford and Cambridge and so on are literally the dumbest, most insanely stupid people on the planet, willing to throw their entire civilization under the bus and watch it destroyed, all for the sake of feeling good about themselves, like they're tolerant. I have to say, I can't believe that human beings are actually this stupid and that you would have entire nations submitting to this nonsense. I have to believe that there are other forces at work here.
Oh, I think they are. There are. That this is the age in which people are believing in strong delusions and embracing everything because of their enmity to God, which is interesting because, of course, Islam is the quintessential expression of the religion that calls evil good and good evil and makes people think they're righteous when they're doing terrible, terrible deeds. So anyway,
yes. Sex with prepubescent little girls and slaughtering people because they disagree with you and so on. It's just fascinating that you ask these guys nowadays, ask them, can you give us a reason why we should believe in this guy? 100% of them will back down, unless you're completely ignorant. If you know absolutely nothing about Islam, they're happy to give you all kinds of reasons to believe in Muhammad, but the reason would never stand up to scrutiny, and so they refuse to offer them. It's just these are insane times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got more insanity here, David. Here's Ian Sleeper, a marvelous English name, Ian Sleeper. And you can see that his sign that he's holding there says, I love Muslims, hate Islam. Love Muslims, hate Islam. And there are 2 cops there. They are arresting him. This happened some months ago, and a court has just ruled. He was arrested outside a London cathedral. He also had another one that said, love Muslims, ban Islam, the religion of terror. And the Metropolitan Police arrested him, held him for 12 hours. And so he entered a legal claim that he was unlawfully detained by police. And he just lost his court battle with the police. And they said that his arrest was necessary. And get this, David, the basis for arrest was not confined to the possibility of a risk of harm eventuating to Mr. Sleeper himself, but extended to the risk of other persons as a result of public disorder. So they're essentially admitting that they arrested him because Muslims would riot. But they didn't arrest the rioting Muslims. They arrested Ian Sleeper. And
in the U.S., we call that the heckler's veto. But so the British government, once again, just did what they always do. It's the same thing we've seen them do with Hatun Tash and others and so on, where Hatun can be surrounded by Muslims threatening her. They'll arrest her. They won't arrest the people who are surrounding her and threatening her and attacking her. They'll arrest her. And once you go that road, you basically encourage people to become violent over anything they don't like. You encourage Muslims, hey, if you want us to make a Sharia compliant hellhole here, just threaten violence over anything. And then we'll go after the things you don't like. So very easy to do. You can say, hey, this place over here sells pork. We will riot in the streets and burn everything to the ground if you do not change that. And police will start arresting them. We stop selling this, or we'll arrest you for upsetting all these kind people that we're programming to be as violent as possible. Pretty
And that's
insane.
common. People don't realize this is not going to stay the way it is forever, just as it didn't 12 years ago. And so, in another 12 years, British police will be doing exactly that, arresting people for selling pork, in an area that is Islamic or something of that kind. And all of this is going to continue to advance. This has happened everywhere that Islam has spread in the world, and only been rolled back in a couple of places, Spain and Israel, notably being two of them. And there's no rollback going on in Britain. Maybe it'll develop, but right now it's not happening. So it's only going to keep advancing. And that means more Sharia, more restrictions on non-Muslims, more violence.
And the longer they wait to deal with the problem, the more impossible it's going to be. Like, keep in mind, at any point, over the past 20 years, 25 years, the people of Great Britain have said, hey, we still vote, and we're going to vote people in power who will not allow this to happen. Instead, nope, we're going to keep voting people into power who are doing this. But the longer you do that, the more Muslims you bring in, the more difficult it will ever be to change by the power of your votes. And so you're eventually going to get to the point where you can't deal with any of this by any peaceful means. And then you get a bloodbath. And it's a bloodbath that could have been avoided, but you insisted on not taking any peaceful route to dealing with it. No, you want to pass this off to the next generation. Leave your citizens in a state of complete desperation, where it's the future of our children versus these people who want to do all these horrible things to us, and you're going to end up with a bloodbath, a violent, bloody civil war being the only way to deal with it. And the only light at the end of the tunnel is we'll be there saying, "We told you so."
Yes, and well, as we talked about before, the Reform UK party is rising, and Nigel Farage, however, said, you can't say this has anything to do with Islam because the Muslim population is growing so fast in Britain, which only means, as you said, it's just going to get worse. And eventually there's not going to be anybody even like Nigel Farage going that far to say there needs to be restrictions on mass migration. There'll just be a Muslim majority in Britain. There'll be Sharia. The native population will be a persecuted minority, as we've seen happen. See, people don't realize. You look at North Africa, you look at Egypt, you look at Syria, you look at all the countries that are considered the heart of the Islamic world. They used to have majorities. Most of them had Christian majorities. Iran was a Zoroastrian majority. What happened to all the Zoroastrians in Iran? What happened to all the Christians in Egypt or Libya or Algeria or Morocco? It's not that they left. They were subjugated under the hegemony of Sharia, and life was so miserable that most of them converted, not because they saw the glories of Islam, but because they saw it as their only pathway to a life that wasn't totally miserable.
And I mean, two things stand out there. One, brilliant system. Evil, sick, but brilliant. This system of we'll take over a population. We'll assure you that no, as long as you accept dhimmi status, that you will be allowed to live and continue on and so on. But they understand that, generation after generation, more people are going to submit to avoid being second-class citizens. And so it's a brilliant long-term strategy. It's evil because, it's ultimately forcing people to convert to Islam and spreading Islam, but brilliant. So on the one hand, you've got that. On the other hand, you have to respect Christians like Coptic Christians and Christians in Pakistan who've endured this for many centuries and are still keeping the faith.
Yes.
That they have withstood it. And I've had Pakistanis tell me, said you could go to my village and saw all of our heads off. We would not convert to Islam. And so yep, they massive pressure and they resist it. Imagine these Christians looking at Great Britain and saying what Great Britain bending over backwards to say, hey, we want to be exactly like that. We want to be exactly like Pakistan and Egypt and so on, where non-Muslims are all second-class citizens. We want to be like that, please.
Huh.
It's insane.
Yeah, it is. It's well, like you say, it's some sort of a. I mean, it's definitely a spiritual battle, and I think it's some sort of spiritual illness that they have fallen ill to. This is Saida Farwa, and she's more of the insanity that is modern Britain. Saida Farwa has been hailed in the Islamic Republic of Iran as, and I quote, a jihadi lioness. She is a jihadi lioness. And she says she actually runs the UK charity, Labaik Ya Zahra, and she's gotten a prize in honor of her charity work. And she tours all around Britain speaking at Islamic charities, the Jihadi Lioness, and the British authorities don't seem to have any problem with that. They just don't want critics of Islam walking around. All right.
Fun times. It's so weird, Robert. I mean, it's serious. It's seriously so weird. Just sit there thinking, you guys are begging for it. I can't even. It's the point. I don't even want to defend you. I don't even want to defend you. It's just the fact that there are people there who didn't want any of this, and they're the ones who are going to suffer.
Yes. All right. I got more weirdness. It's apparently the Oscars are coming up. I don't have any idea when the Oscars are, so they may have just passed.
Woo-hoo.
But it's Oscar season anyway, as far as I know. And so I don't see new movies. I don't see the Oscars. I really have no idea. And I never had heard of this man before. But this is Carla Sofia Gascon. And Carla Sofia Gascon is a man who claims to be a woman, a transgender, as they call them. And Carla Sofia Gascon is up for an Oscar because he plays a role in a show that also I had never heard of called Emilia Perez, about apparently some guy who becomes or decides that he's a woman and goes around claiming to be a woman. So they got somebody to be somebody who is in that situation to play him. Now, anyway, some people are saying that Carla should win an Oscar. Apparently, he's been nominated for one. But the thing is that a few years back, Carla Sofia Gascon wrote on Twitter or X that it was terrible that there were more Muslims in Spain that there had been. And he says, sorry, is it just my impression or are there more and more Muslims in Spain? Every time I go to pick up my daughter from school, there are more women with their hair covered and their skirts down to their heels. Maybe next year we'll have to teach Arabic. And then he says, until we ban religions that go against European values and violate human rights, such as Islam, under the protection of freedom of worship, we will not end part of the huge problem we face. Faith manipulates those who cling to faith. So a guy who writes for Vanity Fair, Chris Murphy, says, you can't make this stuff up. For the love of God, do not give this woman, he calls the guy a woman, an Oscar. So Carla Sofia Gascon is apparently up to get an Oscar, and people are saying that he shouldn't get one because he criticized Islam a few years ago.
It is always weird that whether you're supposed to win an award for acting is based on not on how well you act, but on things you've posted on Twitter. But this is interesting. Um, I I would be screaming transphobia right now and just see what comes out on top. That would be hilarious, right? And be like, no,
Yeah.
the real reason I'm being called out is because I'm trans. Look at this bigot is against me, doesn't want me to win an award because I'm trans. This is war on the LGBTQ community. And so yeah, I'd have to figure out which victim status trumps the other. Um, I have to say, I think Islam wins in that situation. Everyone just always bows to Islam as the supreme victims here.
Yeah, they always win those battles when it's battle of the victim classes. They always come out on top. People are very afraid to criticize Islam and not so afraid to criticize other beliefs, other systems, other delusions, what have you. They just fold when it comes to Islam. So I suspect that Carla is not going to win the Oscar because he dared to criticize Islam. All right, this awful.
I have to
Yeah,
say though, I have to say, everyone, if Carla does not win that award, the only explanation is transphobia. And so you've heard it here, folks. You've heard it here.
that's it, man. All right. There's so much stupid infidels right now, but I did want to get to some more jihad. In Tucson, Arizona, there was this guy, Ahmed Mahad Mohammed, and his friend, Abdi Yemeni Hussein. And they decided to leave Tucson, Arizona, and go to join up with ISIS, apparently in Syria. This was a few years back. And, oh no, I'm sorry, in Egypt, Sinai Peninsula, uh, where ISIS is quite active. And so Ahmed, what's his name? Ahmed Mahad Mohammed had 10 grand for their expenses. They checked in at Tucson International Airport and got through security on their way to their gate, and suddenly, whammo, they get arrested. And it's a shame, really, because Ahmed Mahad Mohammed had said that what he really wanted to do, his life's aspiration, David, was to get to ISIS domains in Sinai, and he wanted to become, and I quote, the beheading guy. So he wanted to be the guy standing there in the videos with the victim in the orange jumpsuit and saw off his head. And I thought, that's real Islam. That's a guy who,
Well, to be fair, to be fair, everyone wants to be the cool beheading guy, right? If you're a
well, yeah,
jihadi, don't you want to be the cool guy who gets all the press, you're in all the pictures and stuff like that?
yeah, all this stuff
Hang
by,
one second, Robert. We have
yes, sir.
breaking news.
What you
Breaking
got?
news. The 97th Academy Awards. The 97th Academy Awards is March 2nd, 2025. So that's
Oh,
when we
okay.
find out.
Well, we'll have to
That's
revisit
where we
Carla
find
then.
out who the biggest. Yeah, that's when we find out who the biggest victims are. That's when the decision will be made.
Yes. What I was wondering about the Tucson, Arizona guy before we go on is where did he learn about Islam? You have two Muslims from Tucson who decide to join ISIS, and one of them wants to become the beheading guy. Why didn't his moderate mosque teach him to reject this understanding of Islam? Every American authority assumes that all the mosques are teaching peace and tolerance in the United States. So where did he get this idea, and why aren't any authorities caring to look into that?
And it's the same issue that goes way back to The people who, the jihadis who tried to kill you and Pamela Geller in Texas, they were from Arizona. And it's like, where are all these people in Arizona? Some of them converts to Islam sometimes, getting the idea that their job is to go around slaughtering people. Where are they getting this idea? They all come up with it on their own, or is that actually being taught in their mosques?
Yeah. The two guys who came to kill us were from the Islamic Community Center of Phoenix, which is still operational. And one of them, Ibrahim Simpson, had appeared in promotional videos for the mosque. And a lady who went to the mosque, who was an associate of the famed moderate Muslim Zuhdi Jasser, although she was later killed in an accident, she said that Ibrahim Simpson was always around the mosque and would never do anything without asking the imam if it was Islamic. And I think, wait a minute. Okay, so we have somebody who knew him say this, and yet no authorities in Phoenix or anywhere else made any effort to determine what the role, if any, of the Islamic Community Center of Phoenix was in sending those two guys over to Texas to kill us. You got to wonder, David.
I certainly do.
All right, also in Baluchistan, which is in Pakistan, although they were trying to break away, a New York-based Muslim named Anwar al-Haq. He's been living in New York for 28 years, but he returned to Pakistan recently, and he had with him his 14-year-old daughter. And while he was in Pakistan visiting relatives with his 14-year-old daughter, he killed her. And he says that it was because she was committing blasphemy. And you know the usual story. The family objected to Hira, that's the daughter's name, to her dress, her lifestyle, her social gathering, and her friends. So once again, we see it. What's that all about?
A couple things there. First, when you said blasphemy, pretty easy to justify killing someone for blasphemy in Islam, because we see this. We see this in the Muslim sources. We see Muhammad ordering people to kill critics. We see in Sunan Abu Dawud where a man killed the mother of his own children. When Muhammad found out about it, said, "Hey, who killed this woman?" He said, "Yeah, she was saying mean things about you." And then Muhammad said, "Oh, okay, don't punish this guy." So it's understood that that's fine. But as for the other stuff, very easy to justify killing your daughter or other family member for not being Islamic enough. The general roadmap, ladies and gentlemen, is Surah 4, verse 65, says that if you do not submit fully to all of Muhammad's decisions, you're not a real Muslim. So in other words, if you say, "Oh, yeah, Muhammad said that, but I don't have to follow it," they will put you in the apostate category. You're an apostate. What's the penalty for apostasy in Islam? Death. And you have Muhammad in Sunan Ibn Majah saying, "Carry out Allah's penalties even against your own family members." And so what do? My daughter's out of line. She's an embarrassment to me. How do I fix this? Kill her. And he's in the perfect place for it, because that is the honor-killing capital of the world, Pakistan.
Yep. And Surah 18 of the Quran, of course, contains the famous story of Moses with the unnamed wise person who's called Khidr in Islamic tradition, or Green. And he kills a young man and then explains to Moses later that he did it because he knew that he was going to grow up to be unrighteous. And his righteous parents deserved a better child. All right. We have in New York City, our old stomping grounds. Where do we have her? I know we have her here. There she is. Sinmaya Caesar. Sinmaya Caesar, who is a convert to Islam, obviously, and she became an ISIS recruiter. She calls herself, okay, you're going to love this, she calls herself Nutella. Anyway.
Guys, that means, for everyone who's watching, that means the mother of Nutella.
That's right. All right, so
I'm guessing she named one of her kids Nutella. And so she's Nutella. Definitely
so
dealing with the top brass here.
yes. All right, so she became an ISIS recruiter, and in 2019 she was given 4 years in prison. And the judge said we also have to make sure to give her um, mental health support that would save her as a human being. And then a year later, into her 4 year sentence, she was released and blew off a later court decision and cut off her ankle monitor and started recruiting for ISIS again. And so now, after she was given the slap on the wrist before and the extremely light sentence, now she is being looking at 70 years in prison for her continued ISIS activities. I don't know. Do they have Nutella in prison, David?
I don't recall because I've never. It's possible that it was on the. You get the food that they give you every day. They're definitely not giving you Nutella, but they also had stuff that you can buy. The commissary. I don't recall. It's possible though. She better hope they have some there if she's going
Yeah.
away. It does raise the interesting issue, Robert. I thought once you get these people out of whatever harmful environment they're in that's brainwashing them into thinking that Islam's a religion of violence, that if you just got them out of that environment and put them through your cute little de-radicalization program, that they were going to come out peaceful and model citizens. And here it's making it look like it doesn't even work.
Yeah, it's very strange. I don't understand that. You'd think that if you show them how Islam truly teaches peace, then they will turn to a life of good works. It's very strange.
Yeah, it's almost like they go in there and they build an army.
Yeah.
And then they come out and they try to recruit for the army out here, and then they get locked back up and they keep recruiting. They keep recruiting more and more people and so on, and building an army behind the scenes. It's weird.
It is. And what's weirder is, once again, strong delusion has come upon authorities all over the West so that they let this jihad recruitment happen in prisons and don't do anything to counter it because, of course, that would be Islamophobic. All right, over in the Netherlands, we had a migrant from Syria. And what he did was in Utrecht at 3 p.m. on Saturday, he walked down the street, busy street, and he stabbed an 11-year-old girl to death. And the cops, of course, are searching for a motive, but they do point out that they are investigating reports that the suspect had been acting confused in the week before the attack. So what are they trying to tell us there, David?
Oh, that it has nothing to do with Islam. It's what they always tell us. But it is interesting that, again, burn a Quran. They don't say, hey, this guy was confused a week earlier. They just say, nope, this person has to die. Here's where you can find him. But then it's, 7 years ago, he was looking for where to find a store that he was looking for, and he was a little confused. So we're going to assume that he has mental health problems and that he's just confused and demented, and that it has nothing to do with Islam.
Mental illness is the big favorite fallback rather, that the authorities use. They can't admit that there is any such thing as jihad, and consequently they classify so many jihadis as mentally ill. They're going to need to revise the DSM manual to add in jihad as a mental illness, and probably build more hospitals.
Yeah, sudden
ultimately.
onset jihad syndrome.
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm. Sudden
It's a
onset
mental
jihad
illness.
syndrome.
All right, we got a guy, I don't know if it's sudden, but he certainly got jihad syndrome. This is Zakir Hussain, who is a resident of Britain, and they didn't publish his address. There are probably a lot of Zakir Hussains in Britain, probably as many as there are Martin Frosts, but They didn't publish his address, but they did arrest this guy. He wrote on social media about Jews. He said, "We are hunting them for fun in the UK." And he said October 7th, when 1,200 Israelis were massacred by Hamas, that it was a beautiful day. So we are hunting Jews for fun in the UK. That's Britain today.
Always fascinating that you'll have all these Muslims saying, "Hey, wherever you are, we're going to hunt you down. We'll hunt you down in the UK. We'll hunt you down in France. We'll hunt you down in Germany. We'll hunt you down in Italy. You're never going to be safe. We're always going to be trying to kill you." And then they'll turn right around and say, you have no business having a country where you can protect yourselves. So what is this? Why don't you just live safely in other countries?
There you go. Why not? Why indeed? All right, look, Germany, another one like this. There's so many like this. It's all the same. And this, here again, we have it, what we were talking about before. Hasibullah A. So we don't have his last name. Hasibullah A. He was apprehended last Friday. And what happened was that he was arrested. He's from Afghanistan. And he was displaying erratic behavior, they said. So the cops went to his residence and they found 2 knives, a balaclava, an axe, a hammer, and written materials that contained threats against Germans, including "Death to you Germans," that he had written, as well as "Long live Afghanistan." And you gotta wonder, why did Hasibullah A leave Afghanistan and go to Germany if he hated Germany and wants the Germans dead? And of course, there is a very important answer to that question, is there not?
I mean, if I didn't know better, which I don't, I might think that a lot of these guys are just jihadis and they say, "Oh, I'm not safe in this country," just to get out of the country and go wage jihad.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, it's very clear that this guy, if he hates Germans, he should just leave or he shouldn't have come. But there's no indication of that. There's only an indication that he was planning jihad massacres. And so it seems as if he's grabbing hold of the Quran passage, chapter 4, verse 100, which promises rewards, great rewards, to those who emigrate for the sake of Allah. And so if you're going to get great rewards from Allah, well, that's a powerful enticement that no Western authorities have pondered, no Western authorities have examined. So that's the story of Zakir Hussain. I got to say, he ate the... This is not, of course, the famous percussionist by the same name.
Yeah, it's I mean, hard to compete with an eternity of deflowering virgins that you get in Islam.
Yes, indeed. It's a huge incitement, really, in all seriousness, because the Quran and Islam create a win-win situation. You get killed fighting the infidels, you go to paradise and get the virgins. You win fighting the infidels, you take their women on earth. So either way, if you're a lust-filled young man, this is a very powerful incitement to violence. Controversial thing happened in Syria over this past week, David. Of course, Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, which has been a jihad group all these years, they seem to be imposing Sharia now that they're in power. And recently there was a man who was murdered, a Christian, named Lucien Haddad. And at his funeral, Lucien Haddad's funeral in a church, a lot of Muslims appeared. Now, some sources say that the Christians, out of love for the Muslims and to show their unity as fellow Syrians, recited the Fatiha, the opening, the first chapter of the Quran, most common prayer in Islam, at the funeral. But other sources say no, they were forced to do so by the presence of jihadis, since after all Lucien Haddad had been killed by jihadis. And so they were afraid that there would be more killing, maybe even at the funeral itself. But in any case, the Fatiha was recited at this funeral in Syria. Now, why is that a dangerous thing to have happened?
If they recited it willingly to show solidarity, then they're morons. If they were pressured into it, that doesn't, that's a different story. But the end of Surat Al-Fatiha is asking Allah not to be Jews or Christians. Don't make us Jews or Christians. It doesn't say that, but we know what the words mean. Again, at the end, when it's those who have gone astray, make us not like those who have gone astray. That refers to Christians. And so you would actually have Christians praying not to be Christians anymore and to be Muslims. And that's just insane.
Precisely. So it doesn't look as if things are good for the Christians in Syria, but we'll see how things develop. Meanwhile, a couple things I wanted to make sure to get in. Back to Britain again. Suella Braverman, the former Home Secretary, she said this past week that if things don't change soon, that Britain could be led by an Islamist government within 20 years and become an Iran-style enemy of the West. I think she's wrong, David. I don't think it's going to take 20 years.
You think it's sooner.
That's right.
Yeah, but between 5 and 10, yeah.
Yeah. Meanwhile, another detail came out. I still can't believe this. But this is from The Sun, the British paper. And as far as I know, no official denial has been made. But if you get to Britain and call yourself a refugee, you can bring 50 of your relatives in every day. 50 a day. This is the story. The Sun says more than 50 relatives of refugees are allowed to join them in Britain every day. The numbers have trebled to 19,154 in a year. So every day, people are saying, oh, I want to bring in 50 of my relatives, and more are coming in. And of course, the British authorities don't have any way to verify that these people are relatives at all. And it wouldn't even matter if they were. The problem is the British authorities don't accept that there is such a thing as jihad, and they're not doing any screening of the people coming in. Or any adequate screening.
Screening them would be Islamophobic, Robert.
Precisely. Oh, hey, this is a big story. Oh my goodness, time's running out. Meant to bring this up earlier. This is Hadi Matar. Remember Hadi Matar, David? He's the guy who stabbed Salman Rushdie.
Oh, yeah.
And that was quite some time ago, but only now. I believe it was today, as a matter of fact, or yesterday. His trial began in Chautauqua County, New York. And he is, of course, accused of attempted murder and assault. He stabbed Rushdie, left him blind in one eye, and with a permanent hand injury. And you're going to love this. The prosecutor, Chautauqua County District Attorney Jason Schmidt, he said, from my standpoint, this is a localized event. It's a stabbing event. It's fairly straightforward. I don't really see a need to get into motive, whether that's applicable or not applicable and what that consists of. I'd like to avoid all that. Meanwhile, Hadi Matar's attorney, Nathaniel Barone, he wants screening of the jurors, potential jurors, saying that people might be Islamophobic. He says they've talked about the reason why this alleged crime supposedly occurred was because of this book involving Muslims. All that. So it's kind of like the barn door's been opened to prejudice. So on the one hand, you got the district attorney saying motive here. And you got the defense attorney saying, yeah, and we want to screen the jurors to make sure everybody loves Islam.
And so I guess I guess what you're, because keep in mind, I mean, there's too much evidence. They know this guy's going to be convicted, but it's going to be like, what is your sentence, and so on. If you're a jihadi trying to slaughter someone to, for a fatwa and so on, that's in their minds, you're in the terrorist category. If you just stabbed a guy, you're in the stabbing the guy category, and it's not some jihad attack. It's not some big terrorist attack. It's nothing to do with trying to subjugate the West and so on. It's just hey, this guy upset me, and I was really upset, and I went up and stabbed him. So they're mainly looking for a low sentence just for like a stabbing, and not for being a terrorist, not being in the terrorist category. But it sounds like everyone's on board. Sounds like everyone's on board, the prosecutors and the defense attorneys. So, yep, that'll be in court. It'll be this poor guy. He's having a real bad day, and just went up and stabbed some random guy who, let's face it, had kind of deserves it because he's so mean to everyone and upset everyone.
Yes. And so probably he'll be out on the streets again in a few years. And he has expressed, Hadi Matar, he's expressed no repentance. He's proud. He's happy that he did it. He was able to serve Allah in this way. He knows that Khomeini said it was a bad book. And so he knows that he will get his reward from Allah. And so everything's going to be good. But the other critics of Islam should probably be watching over their shoulders. Hadi or somebody could be around. But that is no call for fear. That is a call for courage and resoluteness in the face of evil. And so that's what we are striving for at all times. And we will be watching Jihad continually. And back again. Watch this space for more. And until then, pray, hope, and don't worry.